Morning everybody. This project's one of the ones that's a real confidence builder. With a little bit of research into how to actually take the thing apart and put it back together, or being shown how to do it, such as here in the video, this thing will really boost your confidence up. And the more things you do to boost your confidence, the more projects seem less daunting and the more willing you will be to take on larger projects. Next thing you know, you'll be building a whole rear end differential, whichever you want to call it, assembling a whole car, whatever. The main thing is to get your proper safety equipment, eye protection, jack stands, that sort of thing, a good jack, some simple hand tools, and practice your skills. Once you get your skills, the craftsmanship and the talent will follow. And as that all builds up, you'll be surprised what you can do. You can do anything that you put your mind to. I truly believe that. It's one of the great things about being human. We like to create stuff, we like to build stuff, and we like to learn. And this is just another way to do all of those things all wrapped up into one. Anyway, let's get started. I'm going to show you a clip of the bad wheel bearing that started all this, and then we'll get to putting some axles in. Here's the culprit that caused this axle swap to begin with. You can see that the seal has gone out of the side of the right rear wheel bearing. So one last thing I did before we head out here to put these axles in is I went ahead and put a stripe down each one with a Mark All paint pen, so we can see how much they've twisted in the future. Okay, so here we are this morning. We're getting ready to put this thing back together, and I got to get this backing plate back down into place, and I got to get the other axle back out before we can put the new axle in. And it's been sitting for a few days, so it's still decided to get a grip. So I'm going to have to do a little slide hammer action on it. Not a big deal. Just make sure that you got your bolt nuts run down so you got plenty of thread. You don't want to mess the splines up. The other thing to remember is to make sure that you got a level playing field for the plate to pull up against. So you try to get all nuts on at the same level. That's pretty easy to eyeball once you get it on there. This has still got to go in some. There we go. And then this shouldn't take but a little light tap or two. Yep, because we've already had it out. Go ahead and spin the weight off. And these are not the lugs that hold my wheels on. These are lugs that I keep in my slide hammer kit just for doing this sort of thing. Grab one of these discarded rubber gloves from earlier. There's one axle out. I had to get the backing plate out of the way while we worked on this thing, which means I had to bend the brake line a little bit, which I didn't want to do. Now on the good side, I didn't have to bend these brake lines a lot when I put them on here. So they ought to be, still have a pretty good amount of flex to them. And if there's any question, then in the area of safety, which is the most important thing we deal with when messing with these race cars, or any car for that matter, particularly brakes, then we will replace it. This thing's kind of self-centering. Not self-centered, self-centering. There. And then I can reach up here and move the brake line as need be to get it back into place. And see, it pretty well goes right back where it needs to be. So now we're ready to get the axle in, and then we'll get the brakes back on. Okay, so before we go any further, I went ahead and put the new bracket on here. New retainer ring, make sure it lines up, and it does. Alright, now as I said in the little clip, I've already put the stripe back on, and now we can put the new axle in. Now, what I tend to do is running on up till I get close. And what we're going to have to do, hardest part's getting this O-ring past the backing plate. So what I usually do is dip a little bit of this grease that come out, stinky old rear end grease, I know, and I put a little light coating of it around just to slick that O-ring up a little bit. So now we got to get the housing, get the backing plate over that O-ring, which is going to prove difficult as always. This is the hardest part of this, is getting this O-ring through that plate. You gotta get on the splines, then pull that backing plate forward. See, it's catching on the O-ring, is what it's doing. Whew. What we don't want to do is pull it in with the plate. Now, we can take the slide hammer and knock it in, but I try to avoid doing that if at all possible. Even though it is an even hit, I just got to find the sweet spot. Go ahead and back them backing plate, back them bolts out. She's hung up on the O-ring real good, is what it is. Right there is where we're hung. There's a little bit of O-ring hanging through right there. So what I got to do, work my way past that O-ring. Goes. So what we're going to do is turn that up like that. All right, we've got it. stick the bolts back through again. This will keep everything lined up. And as they're going down, they'll loosen up. And that means they're pushing it on in. What I'm trying not to do is hit it with the slide hammer, because that shocks the spool into gear. And I'm trying not to do that. And I've already counted the splines. I know all that's right. Now, what I'll do is slowly work this in, turning all the bolt heads. Or the nuts. That should be easier if I had my side ratchet out here. But I'm doing it with the average stuff that most everybody's got in their toolbox. That way you see that anybody can do it. I just felt it moving. It's starting to go. See, it just moved. That means it jumped in a bit. So I need to come over here and run this one on up. And see, there goes the axle. It's in place. The reason I spun the bearing was in case that O-ring shaved off any when it was going through that backing plate. See, now I can go ahead and push everything forward. It's seated. It ain't going anywhere. I can take the nuts back off. Well, what that did was that pressured that O-ring through evenly. Now, that was with the old backing plate, or retaining plate I should say. I keep wanting to say backing plate. So I'll go ahead and slide that out of here. There. Get it to wiggle a little bit. And it'll come on off. I'm going to have to cut you all off for a minute, because I need to roll under here and make sure this thing's seated up, and I need to get where the camera is. So I'll be back momentarily. Okay, so we're back. I've got the axle in. Many apologies, I forgot to turn the camera back on. But when I rolled up under there, everything was lined up. And I went ahead and put the nuts on, put the retaining plate, put the nuts on. And that was really the only thing you missed, but it was the same process as you seen earlier in the video, except I used the new retaining plate. I tend to use the old retaining plates to pull the O-ring in case something was to happen and hang up and bend the plate. But the main thing is to get that O-ring in evenly. Be careful not to shave it going through the backing plate. I know I've said that 3 times, but it's very important. It can and will leak. And then when it goes into the housing, it's just a matter of pushing it evenly. It's kind of hard to just push it with your hands and do it, because you got to squeeze the O-ring down and get it in, and there's not a lot of chamfer on those housing ends typically. But once you get it started, that's when you see the backing plate kind of square up to the housing end. That was the O-ring going in, and then you could just push it from there. As long as you got a light coat and a lubrication on it of some sort, it'll go right on in. Anyway, I hope you found this interesting and entertaining. If you have any questions, ask. I'll see how many of them I can get to answer. And don't forget to like, subscribe, or comment below. And until next time, this is Fab Race Mod Repeat, hoping everybody has a great day. We'll see you then.